Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the DCU Experience. Things are going to sound a little bit different and look a little bit different today because I am in California. I don't have my computer. I am on my iPad, so if the audio from my end is not as good as it usually is, I am out in California, and that is the reason for that. But today we have a really exciting episode. We're going to talk all about Creature Commandos. The finale just came out. We all saw that. Really excited to dig into that. What do we really think? Because the last few episodes we've been teasing, maybe not everything is perfect on the DCU Experience's opinions on the Creature Commandos. We're also going to dive into some power scaling, which is something that key issues, crisis, and true for as well here at the end of the stream, which I know everybody has been looking forward to. But of course, with me, I have Nick, Crisis, and True. We are the DCU Experience. We're sponsored by Gamer Subs. If you would like to save 10% on your Gamer Subs order, go to use code Key Issues at gamersubs.gg. So with all that being said, the Creature Commandos finale is finally out. We got to see the whole story wrap up, and I think it did wrap up pretty nicely, but maybe not in the way that we expected it to. I'm going to open it up to the floor. What do you guys think about how the story ended up wrapping itself up? There's still some loose ends. The whole Clayface thing. Rick Flag's still injured. We've got some people that showed back up, some people that met their untimely ends. How do we feel?
I think Darkseid showing up at the end and killing everybody in the Creature Commandos was a bit much. Like, I don't know why they chose to go that route. Seemed like a little forced, if you ask me. But
Zach is the blueprint, obviously.
Yeah, okay. Zach is the blueprint. Yeah, we got that.
I mean, overall, I think I'm happy with the episode. I think as an episode, it's really good. I did enjoy it.
Drew, can we do a slight detour? Weren't you supposed to have a webcam by now? Let's explain to the people why you don't have one.
Okay. So I said I'd have a webcam in a couple of weeks, but like in UK
is there some
time,
type of trade
American
blockade
time,
happening in the UK right now?
There's a lot happening in the UK, but it'll be sometime end of this month or start of next month. Probably the end of next month, maybe March.
Web cameras are very rare in the UK.
Yeah, we don't have any glass anymore. What was I saying?
Shit about Creature Commandos. I don't remember.
Oh no, sorry. The episode itself, like I was watching, I was like, man, this is a really good episode. But then I finished the episode, I was like, man, there's a lot of questions left on the table. We know there's going to be a season 2, but there's a certain character. I'm talking about Cersei here, which I feel like was done a lot of disservice by this first season.
I'm gonna be honest. I completely forgot that she was not in the episode at all.
Yeah.
You just mentioned it. Yeah, that's like a pretty big deal, but continue.
Yeah. So I think once everyone else gets their opinions out, I do want to talk about her for a little bit. But yeah, no, the episode is good, just left a lot of questions that we definitely need to be answered. But
I think that the episode itself kind of, while I thought it was a good episode in general, and it kind of wrapped up the story that they were trying to tell, and it was another great example of them kind of diving into the backstory. I feel like this show has shined when it talked about the backstory, the origin stories of these characters. A lot of modern comic cinema has kind of foregone the origin story because so many of those characters, we don't really need to rehash that story. We don't need to hear about Uncle Ben dying again, or Bruce Wayne's parents getting shot, or Superman landing in Kansas. Like we've seen it many, many times. But for new characters, it's great, especially with some of the emotional depth that they added into the backgrounds. For those of you guys who've been following along with our series on the Creature Commandos on the channel, you'll note that there have been some slight deviations from the source material, but I think that for the most part, the comments and people I've talked to, the guys here in the podcast, probably agree that those changes have been for the better. They're a little bit more emotionally resonant than what we got in the comic books for those characters. Some of them, again, are very seldom used. But as it goes for the main story of Creature Commandos, I kind of thought it. I won't say like it was like ass or anything. It was just very thin. Like the overall narrative of the plot is really like they go to Pokolistan to guard the princess and fight Cersei. Then they go back to kill the princess, and then they do, and that's kind of it. There really isn't a whole lot of depth to it. It felt more like it was setting up a grander story that we're gonna maybe learn more about later. So while it did a good job of giving us background information on the characters, it didn't really tell to me a very compelling, like end-to-end 7 episode like story. But that's just my opinion. You guys might be different.
No, I mean, I think I agree. Overall, the episode, I think, did wrap things up more than I maybe, well, I wouldn't say more than I thought it would, but definitely differently than I thought it would. I think that the villain of the season, that being the princess, I guess, was like one of the weaker villains that I've ever seen out of James Gunn, especially if we're comparing to the most recent stuff that he's done in Guardians 3 and Peacemaker. I just think she was like kind of nothing. I don't really know what her motivation was. I don't know
It doesn't matter like at all.
Yeah, like the character is just kind of like a blank slate of, I guess, projections. Like at the end, the bride gives her this whole speech about like who she is and how she's like a narcissist, and yet, but why? I don't understand like why she wants to destroy the world, or I don't think we got any really any answer to that. So I would say that was kind of unsatisfying, especially when we had to sacrifice Nina to sort of get there. And I think overall the villain being so rudderless was really my biggest issue with the series overall. What I did really love, on the other hand, were all the individual characters of the Creature Commandos, which I think James did an expert job of making us care about every single one of them. So I think that was definitely a triumph, but where it failed was literally everything that wasn't like a flashback or a scene that was like team building with the Creature Commandos in between themselves. Like everything involving Princess or Cersei or Waller was all kind of like nothing for me.
Yeah. When if it
I
wasn't
just kept
to do
hoping
with those characters, so I was going to say if it didn't have anything to do with either the characters or their development, it felt secondary, and it didn't live up to the character writing itself.
I kept hoping we were getting more, and this is kind of something that I'd been talking about for a couple weeks, and I just didn't see. I feel like all of these episodes needed to be about 10 minutes longer, and all of those 10 minutes should have really been focused on telling a more cohesive narrative story around what was going on in Pokolistan. And I'm not 100% sure if like the reason that James chose to do that was because he wanted to have kind of a throwaway, like the princess is I don't know, maybe she exists in the comics. I don't know. I don't really care. In the country of Pokolistan, I don't know if it exists in the comics. I don't really care. But it just seems like it was all kind of created to facilitate this small story, but really it was more a coming together of a group of characters. But overall, not super strong.
I'd say it's more like Guardians 1 than it is his more recent projects, which I think are more well-rounded. Yeah. Like Guardians 1 is great, but obviously it has its shortcomings with Ronan and
for sure,
and us caring about him. And I think there's a similar issue here. I don't really think that like the twist worked that well, where it was like, she's good, she's bad, she's good, she's bad. Now again, and the bride had it all figured out all along. That being said, I do like the concept of the Creature Commandos, and I like the characters that he created within this team. And if the Pokolistan stuff is just over and done with, which I'm assuming that it is, we have these threads left open that we need to resolve in the form of Clayface and Cersei, really, the two big villains. Everything else, I think, will fall in line. I think there's going to be a lot of blowback with Rick Flag Sr. and how his character moves forward from this woman that he was starting to fall in love with, who was actually evil and was killed while he was like in a coma, right? When he did everything he could to prevent that from happening, and really believed that she was not evil, right? So I think that needs to be resolved. And on the Clayface front, we kind of need to know like why Clayface was working with her in the first place. Why was Clayface there? We don't have any information on that, and now she's dead.
Well, so
I'm assuming Clayface is going to come.
The bride speculates towards the end. You know, she's like, "Well, Cersei was right, and the princess used Clayface to impersonate the Amazonian college professor or whatever, the authority on the subject, to, I guess, just cast doubt, to muddy the waters, to get them, you know, like she figured that Rick Flag must have doubted. He would have been in love with her. Maybe she even, you know, did what she did and to seduce him to secure that. Knowing that she was guilty from the onset, and that if they were to kill her, it would be the right move for, you know, the world or whatever. And so she sends Clayface to impersonate the person, and then play out this whole charade of like, is she guilty? Is she not? Do we believe Cersei? Did Cersei hire Clayface? Just get this shapeshifter in there to confuse people and bury the lead, I guess. But there needed to be a scene of like Waller and Cersei, and just kind of tie the knot, have them communicate something, or even if you wanted to have Cersei, because what I was expecting, right, at some point in the shows, I was expecting we get the vision of you know, all the Justice League, the Titans, you know, presumably the whatever Peacemaker squad, Vigilante, they're all dead, and we see that the princess is leading the charge. Now we know that probably can't happen, obviously, because she's dead. So I was expecting a scene where that vision, we see it play out again, like maybe Cersei is laughing in her cell or something, and then in the princess's place now it's Cersei, and Cersei was pulling the strings this whole time to, like, maybe her biggest competitor would have been the princess in Pokolistan, but through her precognition, she was like, if I get her off the board, I will be the one to destroy the world and leading the charge. But they just kind of drop. I think the pros to this episode, and again, kind of what Garrick was saying, a pro for the whole show is the characters, building them out. Like the Nina plotline, that was immediately emotional. It was immediately James Gunn doing his thing, where he's putting these superhero characters in like the toughest real positions of, like, you know, the mother who doesn't want this child to suffer, and just like, wow, it's like the first minute of dialogue is spent, you know, focusing on that. That was all good, but in terms of a finale, it was definitely unsatisfying, and in a way where, like, I feel like with shows, it's maybe they should have done a better job predicating this on the idea that this is a season 1. You know, that this is this is a chapter 1. This is one part to the whole story. Because I mean, there's weird little world building things too that we don't get, and I don't know. I'm not confident that we'll get a conclusion there. Like in the princess's room, she's got like a holographic globe, like a foreboding globe of the planet. You know, it's not like it's not like a super high tech facility she's in, but there's this weird like piece of tech there. And then also
that whole thing is weird. Can I just, that is a whole weird thing. Like they have laser suits that can fly, you know, like Iron Man, but also they like do the whole where's the beef kind of like Eastern European stereotype thing. Something is not working. It's not crossing the streams there. It was weird. It didn't vibe.
And then
didn't pass the vibe check for me.
I feel like the Frankenstein plot, that was kind of also just snipped towards the end, like it was going somewhere.
Oh, don't worry, I'm sitting right here, vindicated.
That's all I'll say about that.
Thank you.
I'll wait for Nick. That's his whole thing. He's the most read on Frankenstein, like True is with Cersei, so they'll get the floor there when the time comes. But
the time has come. Trust me.
Well, I think beyond that, just to sum up my thoughts generally about the finale, is there's still a lot of hanging plot threads. I think it would, if this was honestly, because James Gunn knew that he greenlights his own stuff. He could have easily said, this is call it season 1 as soon as it's out, because to me, that's part of like the packaging and distribution of something, is that leaves an impact on how I interpret the thing. And if I say, okay, well, am I satisfied with it as part 1 or as a whole, its own thing? And as its own thing, I'm not satisfied yet. I feel like there's too much dangling. If you want to call it the A plot, I would hesitate to call the Piccolo stand thing an A plot, because it doesn't get as much depth as the backstories, or the interplay there. I would say the A plot, pretty lacking. I think we're all kind of confused. And then also, my big question, Waller, she trusts Rick Flag. She's going to trust them more than these creatures that, she'll send them to die. She doesn't care if that's how it worked with the squad. She's like, Rick Flag is the guy that I trust to whatever, to position these guys where they need to be. Whereas everyone else, they're kind of loose cannon. She has bombs in everyone else's neck except Flag, right? But then the bride, on her own intuition, is like, no, I need to kill you. Even though I don't think they ever interacted before that final scene. I don't think, like, she just has a gut instinct that she's a despot and all these things. And kills her, going against orders from Waller, which, as we know from Peacemaker, the least she'll do is put you on some crappy assignment, like take out the butterflies. Here's Peacemaker. I could have given you any number of operative, but you have to deal with this annoying, crazy person. And then, like, from in the Suicide Squad, that one girl who hits her in the back of the head with a golf club, she got fired or probably sent to the gulag or something. And so, but the bride goes against a direct order and she's rewarded. I didn't understand that. She's given her own strike force. I don't really understand. And also, World War III is less likely if you kill the ruler.
Hold on. LP, she didn't go against a direct order. She did her very best to follow up the mission accurately. The mission changed at the very end. She had already sent Nina into the water to kill the princess, who failed. Nina failed the mission. Yes. It just happened to work out that at that point they had already deduced, oh shit, we actually this up, and so her salvaging the operation and then ended up, kind of she took the princess out by herself, was probably something that Amanda would have ordered her to do anyway once they found that out.
Rick Flag had just said, we got it wrong, and then Waller says we got it wrong, unless that phone call that we don't hear, because the princess's attendant, her main attendant dude, is like, the call's for you. So I don't know, unless I figured Waller said, Rick Flag said we got it wrong, don't kill her. Or if the message was, I don't care what Rick Flag says, I don't trust him, he, that would have been a good scene to have, is what's on did Waller say something on the other side of that phone call where she's like, I would trust Rick Flag usually.
A little murky either way, right?
I trust Rick Flag, but he's been compromised because he loves this princess. I'm going to take the chance. I saw a vision that was too real, which, again, because they dropped Cersei, we don't know if maybe her precog is perfect and that vision was true. We just, I guess we just have to wait for season 2 to see if, I guess it was obviously prevented. I don't know.
But then the phone call wouldn't make any sense, because Waller even make the phone call in the first place. She didn't believe Flag, right? So I think she did believe him. He called and said, "Don't do it," and the bride took things into her own hands. But maybe you could say, like, giving the script some grace and sort of delving into what we know about the characters. You could say that Amanda saw herself in the bride a little bit with the decision that was made in the end, which was the right decision and for the greater good. Which is why she was rewarded with this, like, unique space within the Bell Rev facility and her new team as the leader on said team, and now Rick Flag is probably getting demoted. He's going to be working with Peacemaker now, because he let his emotions get involved or whatever. So maybe he's getting the blame for how things went down.
Yeah.
But regardless, I think that the bride putting it all together that well at the end is a little tough to come to terms with, but I think Clayface was the linchpin, and her seeing Clayface really brought it all together, and it could make sense for her putting all that together.
If she maybe before killing the princess conveyed to Waller, I saw her with Clayface, I think Rick got it wrong. Would have been a good scene to have, is whatever Waller said, and then whatever the bride must have said, because otherwise, just judging what we're shown, I was confused. I'm like, why is Waller rewarding her when the last thing we heard was her being like, oh, she has that moment of like, we got it wrong. Rick is telling me we got it wrong. There needed to be more spent on that, I feel. But that was my rant, my confused rant. I was just confused about that in particular, that ending.
Speaking about confusion, I don't actually understand Clayface's goal. Because if we say Clayface is working for the princess, why would you then tell them that Cersei's precog is true? Why not just say she's making it up and this doesn't exist?
Because he got an Xbox out of the deal.
Yeah.
I would ask for a PS5.
Clayface.
I mean, me too.
Yeah.
But we're gamers. What can I say?
Wasn't that before Clayface took over, though?
Yeah, they specify. I think they do specify that the person that when she was interrogating Cersei, that was the real professor or whatever authority on Amazons. That was the real one, and then the princess's ploy was implement Clayface to confuse that, so to give Flag reasonable doubt that the princess is evil and that vision was true. So Clayface impersonated her after the vision was granted.
Like a red herring.
Wait, so Clayface was sent there to be caught to then set up the princess.
Yeah.
Yes.
To be caught, to set up.
Because think about it, if they never go to the house at the time,
guys, are we done?
They never see Clayface. Yeah, because I don't think that's how it was. Because I think No, it's definitely not, because the Clayface that we see in the college scene is Clay. Sorry, the professor we see in the college scene is Clayface.
Yeah,
and that scene happens before the interrogation. That's the start of the episode, and then when the interrogation scene, that is Clayface.
No.
In the interrogation, that's how I always saw it.
The interrogations before.
No, the interrogation happens in the previous episode.
Yeah, they do the interrogation, and then Rick Flag is like, we should see if she's full of shit or not. And so then they go to the house, and then it's Clayface. That's definitely how how it goes.
That's how it works. For sure.
Okay, no. Yeah, you're right, because that was the start of the episode, and we already knew her.
Yeah.
Ultimately, does any of it matter? No.
Well, because I'm just confused about, because we thought he was working with Cersei, but I guess he has no connection with Cersei.
Side question: is Clayface dead? Because they were mopping him up at the end. Is that the end of it?
So I guess he's alive.
Could be a prequel.
Could be, maybe. This is the last time we ever
Could
seen
be.
him.
He looked like he looked pretty dead to me, but maybe
They're probably gonna scoop him.
Give him
into
some
a
moisture.
bucket.
He'll bring back up.
Yeah, they put him in a bucket. They put a little water in there, and he's good to go.
I'm sure he'll be fine. I'm not really worried about Clayface being dead, honestly. But let's.
Surprised they killed Dean.
Let's talk about Cersei a little bit, True. You being the resident Wonder Woman fanboy. Give us a full take. We'll give you the floor. What are your thoughts on the character? Why do you think the character was done a disservice? And how would you like to see the character handled in future projects?
So, Cersei is interesting because for any character, there's always some level of something that's always there when you get a new interpretation. So for Batman, no matter what it is, he'll have some form of throwing thing, whether it is cyber darts or whether it's shuriken, no matter what, that visual is there. For Cersei, if you were to take away her name and just call her Billy Bob the Magician, nothing changes. This doesn't. I would never be able to say, "Oh, this is based on Cersei," because she has nothing of that identity there outside of the name and the connection to the Amazons, right? Because one of Cersei's biggest thing in every single interpretation, from the DCAU to the comics to anywhere you ever see her, is turning people into animals. She doesn't do that once ever. She doesn't turn her followers into bestiomorphs or anything, so we understand that is her, right? We don't understand anything about her history because Cersei is the type of character who works in the background, sets up a bunch of plans, and then watches that go through. She doesn't really like to get her hands dirty until the very end, or until she specifically hates somebody. So she does fight Wonder Woman, but she has a particular hate for her. So a lot of that characterization isn't there to be recognized as Cersei, the character from DC Comics, or even Cersei, the character from mythology, right? We could, and I was the type of person where I was like, okay, I will not judge this character until the end, because this could have all been a ploy. Because if this was all a ploy and she wanted to get captured and this was all her part of the plan, I would be like, okay, yeah, this is an excellent version of Cersei. She played the role, tricked everybody was playing to her tune. Therefore, this is a great interpretation of the character. But if this was called Clarion the Witch Boy, nothing changes whatsoever, right? And I think that's the part that does a disservice to the character. Especially when it's a character like Cersei, who is arguably Wonder Woman's second most powerful antagonist, really only behind Ares, that she fights consistently. To have her in a light like this, where it doesn't feel like she's being respected at all for what she should have been in the comics, is a little bit frustrating. Because it makes me wonder where she will go. Maybe she will end up in that position. Maybe we are going on a journey with her too, right? But imagine if Doomsday showed up and Peacemaker beat him. We can give whatever reason we want for Peacemaker to beat him. We can make it make sense within the story, but nobody would be happy with that, right? Just because of what the character represents to a character like Superman. And I think that's the major flaws with this interpretations of Cersei.
To play devil's advocate, if you consider this to be like a Cersei sort of origin, where what we know about Cersei is she was on Themyscira, she got a vision, nobody believed her, she said, fuck all that, I'm leaving. She gets another vision, and she does get them to believe her, and then it ends up backfiring on her. She seems like a person that genuinely wants to help. Like, what we know about her so far is she is a character that wants to be a hero and that wants to save people. Because the only two things she's ever done is try to save the Themyscirans from a flood and tried to save the world from being destroyed by Kholistan, right? So that's all we know about her thus far. And if she keeps telling people bad shit is gonna happen and no one listens to her, she might become jaded, and then she might eventually become that sort of character you're talking about. So as devil's advocate, if this was like an origin for Cersei, and she had good intentions, but was eventually twisted based on the fact that nobody ever trusted her or believed her, do you think that the character could be molded in a way that makes sense or could be salvaged?
Yes, I think from that perspective, if, like I said, if this is the beginning of an arc that she's going through, that she eventually transforms into the Cersei that we know, I think that would be an interesting thing to do. And I think it can obviously be saved. One of the reasons I'm not super upset is because they said, okay, we have the actress and we're going to have her in live action stuff. We're going to have her in future things. So we know that they already do have plans for her. If I didn't know that, if I just missed that bit of news before watching the show, I think I would be way more upset. It can be saved, but then you're missing like her mythological origins, right? Because she is a character from myth that gets taken into DC, right? It'd be like having Hercules or Achilles and then changing their origin, right? It'd be a little. It's like I understand, but I would like to keep those mythological figures kind of in that realm of that origins stick to the myth, and then they later on get like a different interpretation.
I like that
because we also don't know how much of what she's saying is. Sorry, go on.
I was gonna say I like the kind of arc that you're laying out, Garrick. I think that is an interesting route to go down. It just comes down to like, for as far as I understand it, because I've read a little bit of Cersei's appearances, but fundamentally she kind of is Wonder Woman's Joker in the sense that what Joker presents to Batman is like the alternative inverse to his morality. And so they challenge each other whenever they fight as to like, Batman represents order and the opposition of chaos and crime, and Joker represents crime and insanity, and Batman is this like rigid, like willpower driven, I won't budge, I won't break. And so when in their best stories, they always test those two, viewpoints to see like, is Batman even crazier for trying to pretend that things are, stable, that stability can be won, and or is anarchy the more that's inevitable or something, those conversations in which Cersei is kind of like, Wonder Woman wants man's world to be at peace, and she's an ambassador for truth and peace and all that, and if those two things can coexist, or is she as this fictional, something from aside the contemporary world, and Cersei is more of an extremist as I understand it, when it comes to those same topics. And so it just comes down to, can they organically take the character in a path where when she does cross, streams with Wonder Woman, whenever they do meet, or if they've already met, or if they're going to fight in the future, if you can start from, she's basically an anti-hero, because it just seems like sort of similar to the creature, she's willing to kill to get, what she wants or what she thinks she needs, which is and if I'm remembering correctly, she does refer to herself as the devil, right? She's like, even the devil doesn't want the world to die, or something like that.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. So
But that could be the way she perceives herself, right? Because that's how everyone she's saying that because that's how everyone sees her, when in reality she probably sees herself more as like an angel type character and the savior type.
Yeah. I guess it just comes down to if you can start a character there and take her to someone who is in opposition to Wonder Woman's, the premise of her character, which is that, for all of our differences, we can fight for peace, we can defend peace. Whereas Cersei is like, specifically with men, as I understand it, she's like, no, there's no tolerance. They've crossed too many lines. There's too much abuse going on. There's a darkness in their hearts that can't be amended. And so she sort of uses them like pawns, if I understand her general motivation correctly.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think it's just it's the same problem as like, this is season 1, and do we think it's satisfying? And the answer is probably generally no. But they could bring it back in the same way that Cersei, for now, not Cersei from the comics, not very impressive, power wise, which we'll talk about, I'm sure, in specifics later. But yeah, it's just yet to be seen if they can sort of, with the Commandos withstanding, can they steer the ship for these other ancillary characters or ancillary plot lines in a season 2, or if Cersei appears in Paradise Lost or something, the Wonder Woman show.
Yeah.
I think they probably can. Again, the writing is never been my problem. I think they will write a satisfying arc for the character. It's just, how close will it be to the comics, or how close will he eventually get to that, is the only question I'm asking, right?
Mm-hmm. Because like laid out in previous episodes, this is sort of a character that is held in high regard in the comics, and not necessarily someone we want James Gunn to redefine or create a new origins story for, right? So that's your big concern from that character's perspective. I think that if they were to change it and make it, and something that's interesting and put a unique spin on it, but keep those core elements together, I would be happy with it regardless. But I completely understand where you're coming from. Like if they changed, Batman completely, just for an example, from his origin to how he operates, but he's still like a really cool, like interesting character, I would feel not so great about it.
Mm-hmm.
So if James Gunn did what Zack Snyder attempted in the DC Extended Universe, where you have this Batman who's killing and whatever, but did it in a really engaging way that I thought did not justice to the character, but justice to James Gunn's version of the character, was really interesting and engaging, sort of a Punisher version of Batman.
Mm-hmm.
I could acknowledge that the character is really cool and I like the character as he's written. But that's not what I want to see, right? Which is what you're saying.
And just a quick note on that, especially just because I think a character like Superman and Batman and Spider-Man, all these characters have had a lot of comic book close enough to the comics where I could say, hey, do you want to know about comic book Batman, but you don't want to read the comics? Play the Arkham games or read it or watch the DCAU, for example, and you can get that vibe, right? But with a character like Cersei or Wonder Woman or some of the characters with a lot less stuff, I kind of want their initial kind of spotlights to be a little bit closer to the comics, and then you can do whatever you want. That's crazy later on, right? Because imagine if the Raimi trilogy was same quality, but like it was a completely different take on Spider-Man.
Hold on, they gave him natural webs instead of web. That's
true. This
to the
not even the same character, but yeah, right. Imagine if that trilogy, exact same quality, but instead of, but they changed a lot more fundamentally. It could still be good, and people would still be a fan of it, but it would hit a little bit different just because there's not been a comic book accurate version of the character beforehand that people can then say, oh, this is the difference. Because I feel like once they make this change, a lot of people will think this is Cersei.
Yeah,
that's the important element. I don't mean to cut you off, but
no.
There are there are very few people in the world who have ever read Guardians of the Galaxy pre Annihilation Conquest or pre Dan Abnett's run. They just were not popular characters. The same thing, so when you take liberties with characters, even if they have a very small established fan base, you have to be willing to capture certain elements of that character and keep them kind of the same, or else you're going to do a long-term disservice to the people that are fans of that character. There are not a lot of comic book readers in the world. In fact, there's way less than we normally give ourselves credit for. The highest selling comic book every month is between Amazing Spider-Man and Batman. And those have print runs of, right now, probably close to about 100,000 or less. And those are active people. We add in trade paperbacks and stuff long-term down the road. You don't have a whole lot of people reading comic books. So that is a drop in the bucket compared to the millions of people that watched episode 1, 2, 3 of Creature Commandos. So those millions of people now view that character in a certain way forever, and probably will forever. So if you don't do it right, you can't do it a different way, especially if you're going to have a cohesive universe.
I mean, I definitely did that when I first started reading comics, for sure. Like I would watch things and be like, this character is not how I've seen them depicted in like TV shows and movies and stuff. So it's definitely eye-opening, and I think those contrasts can be cool, especially if it's a new, unique take on a character. But somebody that's not already had that time in the limelight, it's tougher to stomach that, which is what we've been saying, which leads us into a character like Frankenstein, who is not on the level of Batman or Superman or even Cersei, I don't think. I think the character is one of those characters that can be taken by James Gunn and done with what James will do, as Frankenstein is an established character in the canon of the real world, right? Frankenstein's monster, that is, from Mary Shelley's original writings, has just been an enduring character throughout the decades. And now he's being used in Creature Commandos, but he is a character that existed in the comics. And as somebody who has read a not insignificant amount of Frankenstein comics, Nick had an issue with Frankenstein early on in the show that we voiced
And
in
still do.
those. And in this most recent episode, I'll speak for myself. I thought that Frankenstein was going to arrive, join the team, help with the final mission, become part of the Creature Commandos for season 2. That is not what happened. Frankenstein was in his taxi, had a cute little scene with the guy that was worried about being squashed to death. He shows up. The bride sees him. The bride shoots him a bunch in the chest, shoots him in the head, spits on him, and then that's his grand finale. And we get the post-credit scene where he is again recuperating in Polistan with a nice old lady who fed him soup. So this is a character who is essentially a total narcissist, a complete deviant murderer who is solely obsessed with a singular person, that being the bride, and has no other goal in his life. Nick, how do you feel about the character overall? I feel a little bit disappointed with how it ended. I think it was a little bit of like a slapstick ending. Definitely was not what we were expecting, but give us your thoughts.
I think that there's almost no reason for him to have been in the show whatsoever. He doesn't accomplish anything in terms of the general plot, overall narrative of the story, and the only time that he's ever impactful in any meaningful way is in the backstory for the bride, when you get to understand the emotional damage that she went through and why she hates him so much. Outside of that, he is a gigantic incel loser maniac. He's basically like the endgame form of like the angriest loser incels you see on Twitter. But it sucks because, you know, I like normally in videos and set I typically tend to choose to make videos about characters that I grow to like or grow fond of. There are very few times where I make a video on a character because they're popular, just because like I'm hoping to get some views. Like, sure, that's great, but if I'm not passionate about a character, I don't dive into them because I just don't care. And Frankenstein was one of those characters that I'm still working my way through because there's a lot of appearances for this character. But generally speaking, he's almost never portrayed the way that he was shown in this. And much to the point of Cersei, I hate kind of going back to the same topic of, is this character comic book accurate versus does this character just kind of suck? And I think that this version of Frankenstein just kind of sucks. And this, I just said, you know, saying some of that stuff out loud is bummer because I know that James Gunn watches every week and, you know, he was going to be on and he's going to get mad at us, but
he just texted
I don't like,
he just texted me.
yeah, I
like
know he's FaceTiming me right now, dude. It's really weird. I'll call you back, James, but, no, in all seriousness, I don't think that he's a very interesting character, and I don't think that dynamic for him is very interesting. Like, I was kind of hoping that if they were going to continue to go down that road of him being the love-struck, like, puppy dog / crazy person, that they would eventually have some revelation, like, oh, it ain't happening. Maybe I should change life paths, or maybe I could dedicate myself to something else. Or maybe something could be there. But at the end of the series, we have done like a complete, or at the end of the season, we've done like a complete character regression and just landed right back where we were. And I think that probably in terms of, if you look at the overall cast of characters for Creature Commando, outside of just like in general appearances for how they look, I would say like Phosphorus is the coolest looking character, which everybody kind of wanted to learn about. And then after that, it's your tank. It's Frankenstein yoked up with the bolts in his neck, and people wanted to see him, and he never became part of any type of story plot or dynamic that felt like he needed to be there for any reason. So I'm just hoping that next season we get something for him that is a bit meatier. Maybe he has some type of emotional growth, or he gets to be part of the team and part of a mission and impactful and dare I say, heroic in some way, and not just like this like absolute Like,
Loser.
I mean, that's the same way I viewed him. He's an incel dude. Like, he's like he's chasing her around. She's saying no, and he's like, nah. When you say no, that means yes.
It could have been cool to have him be like this sort of weird stalker incel if he was like kept in the shadows the whole time. It's like you see him in the backstory, and then like the first time we see him in the modern day where he's on the ship and he's in the shadows. He looks stoic and badass and like angry. I think if you kept him like that, and then he showed up at the end, and had like a standoff with the bride, and she like fought him off again, that would have been cool. But I think
it's also a bit misleading too when you look at the cast of characters. When they show the big, I'm not sure if we have the asset available, but like the original Creature Commandos, like the graphic that they showed had, I just pulled it up. It had Rick Flag Sr., Nina Mazursky, Phosphorus, Frankenstein, Bride, and then GI Robot. He's right in the middle, which to me, as a viewer who's about to watch this show, you're right in the middle, dude. That indicates you're like one of the central characters in this show, in terms of the composition of the team, and he's not part of the team.
No,
he's just there, being a creep in the background, and it bummed me out. It sucked, but whatever. It's fine. Maybe next season we'll get something cooler. I don't know.
he honestly should.
So-
he should have been inspired by Rick and maybe because it's Shade, right? Is the organization that Frankenstein is part of.
Yeah.
He should have,
Correct.
Maybe Waller could have had some plan for him. Maybe Rick is like, listen, I can't give you love. I don't know how to do that, but we can give you a mission. If you maybe after enough of these, you can impress her. And then that could naturally splinter.
Like, have you
off.
like? He could have given him the classic, like, have you tried like not being a scumbag?
Yeah.
If you do that, like usually when you're like less of a scumbag, girls like are more likely to not want to shoot you 12 times in the chest and then dap you in the head.
Maybe if you
like,
save the world a couple times, she'll text you back, and then that could he'll eventually grow some moral fiber throughout those missions and resemble what he is.
Kill less old Slavic women in a hut and kill more bad guys threatening the world.
Yeah. Which maybe they could take.
So that's my rant. I'm sorry, it was long.
Yeah.
All right, let's transition off of the negative, because I feel like we've been mostly negative this whole episode, but
I could be super positive.
There are some frustrations that we certainly had, and like I said at the beginning of the episode, I think it's probably the weakest James Gunn project in a while, and that's a criticism and a compliment at the same time, because what we've got been so high quality that anything less than
He's calling me again. He said that.
Anything less than that high bar that he set for himself is going to end up being a disappointment. And while I was disappointed with some aspects of the series and the finale specifically, I think overall I had a positive experience. I enjoyed watching every single week. I look forward to it every single week. And I love the characters that were members of the team, that were the Creature Commandos. And the most important parts of these episodes were those flashbacks and the time we spent learning about the characters' backgrounds, their history, each one of them tragic in their own unique way, but ultimately relatable in some sense to at least myself. I think there's a piece of every single one of these characters that you can look at and be like, something that you resonate with. So in the spirit of being more positive, let's talk about each member of the Creature Commandos. Let's go around. Let's talk about who ended up being our favorite character and which backstory you think made for the best, I guess, the plot of that episode. I'll start and I'll say Phosphorus was at the top of the list for me. I think he still is my favorite character overall. But I think Nina's backstory, and it might be me being caught up in recency bias since it was the most recent episode that I watched, which was this morning, but I thought her backstory and the way that it was laid out was the most compelling for me. What Crisis mentioned earlier with the mother and the way she was dealing with her daughter having these developmental issues and not wanting to see her suffer and ultimately wanting to kill her own child was really, really dark stuff. And it got a little bit better, but then it got darker and darker and darker. And James is really, really good at writing this heart-wrenching stuff. And for me personally, this is the episode that I felt the most emotionally engaged with in terms of the character's backstory, which is a really, really huge compliment considering how engaged I was with the previous characters' backstories, especially Phosphorus, if I had to single somebody out, but obviously Weasel as well. The Bride, every single one was deep, layered, nuanced, and like I said, ultimately relatable in some sense. So I absolutely love the Nina backstory, and seeing her be taken out in that way was terrible because Waller described her as this monster that was on the same level of these other creatures. Like, she was like, get Nina near a body of water and it's over. And Waller could not have been more wrong. Nina was the most human character in the entire show. She was very gentle, loving, caring, and she just wanted to live a peaceful life away from everything else. All these other characters, other than Weasel, had a mean streak to them, with the, if you will. Murderers in every sense of the word. The Bride, Dr. Phosphorus, Frankenstein, G.I. Robot, even Rick Flag being a member of the military. But Nina was the one exception, and she had no reason to be there, which makes it all the more tragic. The one place she's supposed to excel, in the water, she couldn't do anything because she's just a girl that was in a situation she should have never been put in. And it was very, very sad. And ultimately, I think it was the best backstory and I guess resolution for any of the creature commandos in my mind.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree because I think a character also affects others with both GI Robot and
The Bride.
the Bride calling her friend, right? So I think overall it was the most impactful, and it was a good thing to save it for the end. Killing her off was a choice I didn't expect, but I think it's it was extremely well done on Gunn's part. But
Yeah, I think they're making a little bit of room for additional characters. There were a lot of Easter eggs that we can talk about in a few minutes. I agree that I think that due to recency bias, that was one of probably the most concise stories that they managed to tell, and it was definitely emotionally impactful because of how much you learn about how tragic her upbringing was and her essentially being forced out of her, not really being forced out of her home, but kind of losing her mother. And anything that has to do, being a father, anything with kids in the backstory is something that immediately kind of triggers my empathy and sympathy in characters, and there's an awful lot of that in this show with Weasel, his backstory with kind of being said that he killed all these kids when in reality he's kind of vindicated. He never killed any kids. In fact, he was a good boy, one of the best boys, trying to do his very best and save these kids the entire time, and he had to eat a shit sandwich for it. Mm-hmm. And then Phosphorus, of course, just a guy trying to do science stuff, and his wife and kid are murdered in front of him. Incredibly tragic. And I think the reason that I lean more towards Phosphorus is because I get him. Like, I get that aspect. If something happened to one of my kids, don't worry about going to jail or a trial because you're dead. That, I would become the Joker. I would become Phosphorus overnight, like if I had to. So I understand why when Phosphorus lost that part of his life, he became his family was killed in front of him. they rubbed his face around in the blood, which is, extra insult to injury, which is already just an incredibly post-traumatic scene. And then they throw him in the radiation chamber, turn him into this irradiated mutant. We have a brand new video on Dr. Frost versus Complete Comic Book Origins, not to plug that video, but you can learn all about his history there. It eventually drives him mad, and what remained of his humanity is easy for him to abandon. He becomes an absolute menace to Gotham, and he throws away every sense of morality that he had. And now he's just basically out there killing, doing whatever he wants. He gives very little shits about anybody that he comes across because he doesn't have to. Like, the world has dealt him a hand of cards that was so sour that, who cares what happens when kind of everything is taken away from you in that regard. So I really liked I think his backstory for me was the most impactful. And also I just happen to think that he was the coolest character and best voice acted character and had some of the coolest scenes in the show. So overall, that's probably my number one pick. Frankenstein being last, of course. Thank you.
I think I would agree.
Crisis.
Yeah, I think I
Who are
would
you-
agree.
who are you buying?
I was saying before the Foster's episode that I was most excited to see him, and afterward I'd pretty much just say everything Nick just said. Very relatable motivations, very understandable motivations, cool power set. He was useful to the team. I think he was ultimately, he kind of was the tank. He also could, his abilities lend themselves a bit to stealth, slowly burning away through the outer wall so they could sneak through. So I thought it was very useful in terms of like a literal sense. And yeah, I mean, beyond that, I thought Nina had the most tragic backstory. Definitely tugged at your heartstrings. Also, because I put it in the thumbnail, we got a Bloodhaven reference, and I was telling myself, because James Gunn has alluded to Bloodhaven before, he said, that's one of the cool things. It's like a Westeros type universe where there's these cities with new history. That's it's kind of alternate history. And he mentioned Bloodhaven when he said that, and we got Bloodhaven now in the DCU. So, and that was through Nina's backstory. So that was exciting. I appreciate that. But
That's
yeah,
all it takes to make Crisis happy. It's
that's
just
Perfect finale.
whisper Dick Grayson in the wind, and he's like, "There we go, baby."
Exactly. So yeah, that her backstory
I'm just teasing you.
was pretty cool. Although there was a little bit of confusion. I mean, and I don't know if we'll ever know, because it seemed like they paint the princess in like an evil light when she's defending herself. There's that shot of her eyes kind of glowing blue under the water, and she's looking stern. Which of course, self-defense and all that. I don't think she's evil for necessarily killing Nina. If any of us were in that position, we would defend ourselves. But it's just like, it's ambiguous. It is ambiguous still. Are we supposed to buy that the bride is completely correct going forward, and just we're not ever going to question if maybe she made the wrong call? But that would kind of be repeating what we said earlier. But yeah, are we excited to see, I guess, with the true ending? We got G.I. Robot has got he's like an Autobot, like he's got a giant mecha body, and King Shark's back, and
he's just G squared now. He's yoked up.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Does he
Someone
have a little
predicted that in
number?
here a
Does he
couple
have a
weeks
number
back.
on him? He should be like G.
I didn't look
infinity.
too hard. I don't remember.
There should be an infinite symbol.
Yeah, one thing too, not to go off on too crazy of a tangent. I think we kind of discussed this earlier, but as long as I don't want to move too far away from Nina real quick, just because I had some things I wanted to say there. But in the comic books, I'm going to be that guy. In the comic books, Nina's. I think that James does. So let me preface this by saying this is entirely positive. James Gunn made a really what I thought was a really good decision by having Nina be her backstory slightly changed how it was, where her mother gave birth to her. There was a birth defect, and then her father, her mother ended up leaving because she couldn't handle the stress of the difference in her child, and kind of what she idolized being a mother would be like. And then her father experimented on her, turned her into a creature from the Black Lagoon-esque monster, and then over the course of her life, the trauma from dealing with bullying and her abstract lifestyle that she had to live because of her deformity, put her into a scenario where she just was like, "Fuck it, I'm out," right? And then now she's gone and she's doing the whole like Gollum, I'm living in the sewers and being a little creature kind of thing. But she was still a good person. In the comic books, Nina was the mother. Her and her husband had a child together. The child had a rare birth defect and died. And afterwards, she started looking for she started continuing this like highly experimental genome research to try and create kind of life. In fact, in the comic books, if you watched my video on the bride, Nina is the one that creates the bride of Frankenstein and Frankenstein's son, which is ultimately the thing that drives those two apart, is because Frankenstein has to kill it. Just gets it. But she's the one responsible for creating the New 52 version of the Creature Commandos and some other things that take place. That story, while interesting and it is nothing, is not as nearly as good as what James had kind of taken it and spun it into. It's far more impactful for her to have grown up that way, yet still remain primarily a good person, a good creature, and live her life. And ultimately, she's the only person in the show who, I think, don't quote me, I don't think she kills anybody. I think that she's just kind of along for the ride the entire time. And the one opportunity she does get to kill somebody, she hesitates because she's a good person for so long that she ends up getting got for it. And that is ultimately... That's ultimately a tragic end to a tragic life. Really kind of sucks, but I thought that another piece of praise for what James had done to some of the character backgrounds here. They are a little bit more better fleshed out, a little bit better modernized. So,
Drew, did you have somebody that you wanted to shout out specifically that you really connected with or appreciated their backstory?
And just so you know, if you say Frankenstein, I'm quitting the podcast.
Man, you really took the wind out my sail. I really was gonna say Frankenstein. I really relate with him. No, I'm joking. Say,
I get that.
For the characters, personal relationship, no, but I still think Bride is my favorite character from the show overall. I enjoy her backstory and her characterization and her eventually kind of softening up a little bit. And I'm hoping what she went through with Nina does impact her in season 2, because we kind of went back into a circle where she was like, "Oh, I've got nothing else to do, so I might as well go on this mission." She says the same thing at the end of this season. But I hope this experience has taught her something beyond just that, That's it for my personal favorite character from the show.
All right. So we have gone for about an hour, but we still need to talk about the scaling, which we've been teasing for.
One more thing, because I made the thumbnail for this episode. Go ahead. I made the thumbnail for this episode, so I just want to say very quickly, we talked about it a little bit last time, and the director of The Flash, Andy Muschietti, supposed to direct the next Batman movie. It's been going rounds. He said, without a shadow of a doubt, Robert Pattinson will not be the Batman going forward. He said that's obviously not in the new universe. We pretty much already said everything we could say about that last time, but that to me seems like the final nail in the coffin.
I think it'd be pretty cool if, beyond a shadow of a doubt, he wasn't the Batman Brave and the Bold director, because
that's a hot take.
Oh, my freaking mic! I thought it was muted.
He's calling me now.
We're never getting James on the podcast. We're never getting him on the podcast. He's gonna be fucking furious.
Man,
so
that is.
I've also used. We only get one F-bomb, and I've used it twice, so we're gonna get demonetized. So
thank you for that.
I'm sure Garrick used it too, actually.
Garrick,
we can talk about Batman stuff more in depth in another episode, because we're done with Creature Commandos until season 2, and we got nothing coming up till Superman. So let's get into the scaling. We've got the previous verse. I know that we've been talking about it on the side here, but if you want to pull up the tier list crisis, we can just stream that and talk about it as we move things around, because I think we're going to be digging into this for a minute or two.
So do you want the final revision, or do you want the tier maker website?
Bring up the website so we can adjust some things, because I have some new thoughts.
Okay. Let me figure out the best way to do that. Let's see here.
Just so the podcast is aware, they're about to talk about if you're listening at home, you don't have the visual reference. They're going to do a little tier maker that some of people online have been asking us to do. Key Issues, Crisis, True they're all very well known in the power scaling community, as Garrick brought up earlier. I personally don't power scale. I'm not very good at it, so I will be here to tell primarily jokes, and they should be excellent quality because I'm very funny. And also, I control the status of the stream, so if I leave, then we're going to be live forever.
We won't spend too long doing it. There's not a ton of stuff, but there is a few things that I wanted to talk about specifically, because I was thinking about it today, and it's like, in this episode, there were definitely some things that happened that sort of changed the way I'm currently thinking the power scaling is going to go, or the hierarchy of power, as Black Adam once said, has, I think, from this most recent episode specifically. So talking about
live on the screen now. Now live on the screen is the template that we've had so far.
Okay, beautiful. So we'll talk about like the baseline of the universe really quickly, just because that's where we need to start before we get anywhere else. And it all basically starts with Blue Beetle, who we're sort of grandfathering in, being a character that was referenced earlier, and something that James just blatantly said was going to be part of the new universe when this movie was coming out. So we were all really excited about getting like the first glimpse of it. And I believe Crisis only went to see Blue Beetle in theaters because it was like the first part of the new universe, other than the Suicide.
I'm so sorry, but the tier list has asked.
Yeah.
She just died, and you gotta put her in that. Come on, man.
It's an apt description. It works.
I can't make a better joke than that.
Okay, so Blue Beetle, in the opening credits of the movie, the Scarab obliterates a planet. We just blatantly see it. Also, Green Lantern ring redirects the Scarab into that planet. So Superman is above them. He's like the strongest. Blue Beetle and Green Lantern are right under that because of that. And then below that, we have Carapax, who somewhat scales to the Scarab. Maybe not at full power. And then we're just speculating on Crypto. The rest of the like middle chunk is really what we're going to spend the most of the time talking about. And I want to specifically talk about Frankenstein and King Shark, just because in this episode, Frankenstein showed up, got shot in the chest, got shot in the head, and was like killed again, basically. But in a previous episode, he was able to like block bullets with his forearms, and they like bounced off. So we were going off the assumption that King Shark and Frankenstein, as well as the Bride, were all bulletproof, like entirely. But I think after seeing the most recent episode, unless we find out that the Bride has like some version of an enhanced gun that is like more powerful than regular ones, I think King Shark should probably move above Frankenstein, and Frankenstein should be put like below Starro, I think.
So you think
because
like that?
King Shark completely no-selled like all of Bloodsport's guns.
Would you put so you said King Shark above Cersei, below the Bride, or you think King Shark is like top of C tier?
Well, King Shark can't beat Starro by himself.
Right.
So I think maybe it's one of those things where maybe like the Bride would beat Starro off the the fact that she's like highly skilled. She has this enhanced strength. She could probably just jump up and punch Starro in the eyeball and kill him. Similarly to how Harley Quinn was able to pierce his eyeball. I think she's kind of like the exception to the rule. So while all those characters would be like somewhat relative, I think the bride, Cersei, would be above Starro, and then the other two would be below, just because they wouldn't be able to do the same sort of thing, because I don't think they're as skilled as the bride is.
Yeah.
And would probably just.
And Starro.
So that's how I feel about
Starro, for frame of reference, he's what it's building. He's either building or small building just through sheer size alone, and you know how the energy that it would take to move his limbs, that energy being exerted onto him is around there. So he has like, I'm pretty sure it's building level durability, and we actually, this one's a little outdated what I have on my screen, because wouldn't you say Phosphorus would just be above the bride?
Yeah, I think Phosphorus should be in a tier above those characters, and then Batman should also be in that tier above Phosphorus, because Batman beat Phosphorus. We know that in the backstory he was defeated by Batman. I think Clayface should also be in the C tier. Probably, I'd say maybe below King Shark, above Frankenstein, just gut feeling.
Yeah. Some of this is kind of just gut feeling at this juncture.
Yeah, it is all. This, don't start arguing in the comments. This is just going off what we've seen initially. That's not. Actually, do. You're wrong. Actually, my bad. I forgot. This is definitive.
I think GI Robot also probably in D tier above Ratcatcher. I don't think Ratcatcher could ever beat GI Robot under any circumstances. So like base GI should probably be in D tier, and then I think the rest looks pretty good. Weasel did get a new feat in the most recent episode where he was able to like bite Dr. Phosphorus and hurt him, like chip his bones, it seemed like.
Yeah.
So that's a pretty good feat for Weasel. Like he has that tensile strength in his jaw to be able to do something like that. I don't know if I would consider Dr. Phosphorus's bones specifically to be higher than a regular bone. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because it's really his like radioactive aura that does the damage. So I wouldn't say that that's like too impressive.
I mean,
but it was also off guard.
That
right?
was like it's also the most passive version of his heat was enough to scorch Weasel's mouth, you know, to the point that he like ran away.
Yeah.
Whereas it's pretty
and
obvious
he does
like
just toss him as well.
yeah, and Phosphorus, it just seems like he has a baseline level of radiation, and then he can kind of amp it up at will. And we see that he can light a cigar. He doesn't vaporize the whole thing, but then when he wants to, he can burn through a tank.
Yeah,
he does not.
He can also touch people.
Yeah, and he can wear clothes. He can walk around with a lab coat on. So it seems like he doesn't have he's not constantly emitting his utmost power level.
No.
So yeah, I would say Weasel probably, I mean, stays where he is. The thing about Cersei, I don't know. To me, either she has like kind of low fight IQ, or it could come down to she's not really that evil of a person. She is trying to save the world, but at no point does she just like turn the bride's head into an inanimate object or something and kill her instantly, like later on. Ball. Yeah, just turn to a bowling ball, turn her brain into Kool-Aid. Like she is clearly capable of that. She turns her arms into inflatable tube men. So I feel like Cersei, under the circumstances that she's trying to, you know, completely obliterate somebody, I mean, I don't know. Until we see Superman resist something like that, she might honestly. The question is like speed. We need to rewatch. We need to rewatch to see if they ever dodge any of the Bokolistan troop, like, because they are called lasers. In the episodes, the audio description refers to them as such. So going off that,
we know for
if anyone
they're
dodges
at least
them.
like lightning timers.
Right.
Does she dodge the meta?
That is emitted by that metahuman referred to as that. And she basically dodges it at point blank range. So at bare minimum, those characters are gonna be that fast. But like the Scarab is able to fly through space like massively faster than light. The Green Lantern ring would obviously be able to intercept something moving that fast as well. So I think there's a case to be made that the characters at the top of the tier list are already like MFTL.
Yep.
As far going back to Phosphorus, his bones were like chipped, but then you see him later in the episode when he's playing ping pong with Nosferatu, and his arms are both completely healed. So has an enhanced healing factor to some degree where his bones are concerned. But I think right now this is pretty safe.
The cat's like
I'm kind of sad.
Cersei's always going to be a problem because we have this in every list. Every single time there's a magic user, it's like, man, you really could just win, right? Like you really could, because stats wise, she's probably in that C B tier. But then I don't know if she'd be able to transform like Blue Beetle or Lantern. But I was actually just thinking, I'm not even sure if she'd be able to touch Phosphorus and transform him either. Like, she might just burn her hands off if he's in the middle of a fight with her, right? So you're always going to have strange situations where maybe they can beat someone above them, but consistently probably not with the way that they're shown to fight versus what they actually have the ability to do if we were to say, okay, use your utmost strength to win this fight, right?
Clayface is also another weird, because you could just shoot through him all day, which is what the Bride would. That's her standard attack, is just shooting you, and I don't think that would do anything.
Yeah, it would be tough for her, I think, to beat Clayface as well. So you have those sort of inconsistencies when you're making tier lists. Like sometimes a character in the same tier is above someone else, but would lose to the person below them. It's not going to be perfect every time, especially when you're ordering. But
maybe Clayface goes up one. I'm not sure what King Shark can do to him actually, but
yeah. I think, I don't know. I feel like he probably could inevitably kill Starro. I don't turn himself into a catapult and throw him into his eye or something, or climb up a building.
Starro probably wouldn't be able to mind control Clayface either. I don't know. Right. It's tough. The C tier is everything is kind of fuzzy, but I think the rest of the tier list is pretty solid.
Yeah, somebody brought up the Rick Flag. Rick Flag says his dad or Rick Flag says his son's an improvement, but that could be metaphorical. And also, Rick Flag has, James Gunn said on Threads that he has like enhancements. He's like not just a peak human for what the verse.
Yeah, it's like cyberheaded, whatever. And I think Rick Flag Jr. is probably getting like one shot killed by Frankenstein. So
yep.
Probably Clay too. But
it'll be interesting to see like King Shark, because that will probably upscale the Suicide Squad's, at least speed. If King Shark is at all relevant in a battle compared to the Bride of Frankenstein, who can dodge lightning and potentially lasers, then everybody will kind of.
I think everyone B and lower should be relative in speed, and everyone A and above should be also.
Yep.
Like a different category. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Green Lantern's probably going to be flying from Earth to Oa like every other day, so he's going to be MFTL just inevitably.
Yeah, sure. So that's the general thoughts. Just a quick overview of it because it's like late for Drew and Nick needs to go eat. So we're going to wrap it up here. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in to the latest episode of the DCU Experience, where we talked all things Creature, Commandos, what we liked, what we didn't like. We are still very much looking forward to the rest of the DCU. Next up is Superman, but in the meantime, in the in-between time, we will be discussing all the rumors, announcements, literally everything and anything that comes out as far as the DCU is concerned. We'll also probably be getting into some rewatches, some retrospectives of things like Peacemaker, Blue Beetle, the Suicide Squad. So be on the lookout for that. Subscribe, like, do all that fun stuff. Check out Crisis's YouTube channel as well. For the guys, I'm Garrick. Thank you so much for watching, and we will be back next week with episode 5 of the DCU.